The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Sandhill's webcast on what's new with SAP PowerDesigner's latest edition, version 16.6. The goal of this webcast is to not only highlight the differences between the Data Architect and Enterprise Architect Edition, but also to focus on some of the latest features in SAP PowerDesigner 16.6. We've been looking at visualization of different modeling tools with additional features and functionalities in this latest version, plus also a quick review of the SAP PowerDesigner repository, portal, and glossary. As an FYI, we are recording this webcast, and we'll send out the link for this recording once we upload it to our YouTube channel, Sandhill Consultants, where we've got a host of additional videos loaded for your review at your leisure. Finally, if attendees have any questions, please use the dialog box to submit the questions, and hopefully at the end of the webcast, we'll do our best to answer them. So with that, let me just start with a quick introduction to Sandhill Consultants. Sandhill Consultants is a group of smart people with great products and wonderful processes that we use to help build comprehensive data architecture for our clients, resulting in persistent data processes management processes. In fact, we actually are certified CMMI, DMM assessors and specialists, and we use the data maturity model as our process for data management processes. We also look towards data governance and data governance practices with the tool sets that we support, and we also look to produce trusted, reliable data, datum veritas as we call it. So Jeff, just go to the next slide, and we'll just talk quickly about some of the services that Sandhill Consultants offers. So Sandhill, as I mentioned, is a certified assessor. So we can actually come into your organization and help you review your data maturity model using the CMMI assessment process. You can contact us at the end for more information on that. We've got modeling services. We have got standards and best practices framework for PowerDesigner. We've also developed our own PowerDesigner education. So if you're interested in PowerDesigner education, you like what you see here, please give us a call. We'll be able to help you with that. And of course, we do data warehousing, consulting, and educational services along with metadata platforms. Coming soon, watch out for our data governance framework, and we'll be talking about that as well. So with that, let me begin and pass over to Jeff to talk about the latest features in version 16.6.
Thank you, Robert. Again, my name is Jeff Giles. I'm an architect here at Sandhill Consultants. So I've been working with PowerDesigner since 1995, so that's quite a long time. What we're intending to do here is to show PowerDesigner to some of you folks that haven't seen it in a while. Maybe you're on version 12, maybe you're even actually on an earlier version, and talk about what the new functionality is since that version, as well as cover what has just been released in PowerDesigner 16.6 for those of you that are already on PowerDesigner 16 and may not have gone to 16.6 yet. So, the top, we'll talk about what is the difference between Data Architect and Enterprise Architect. We'll look at all the different model types that PowerDesigner can produce, what sort of features and functionality is with each model type. We'll look at the PowerDesigner repository and see what we can do with that, as well as we'll pop into the PowerDesigner web as well for a little bit and take a look at what's in there, and also some noteworthy features about 16.6. So before we jump in, I'll just point out some of these features that I will show you in 16.6 when we come to them. First thing is the data modeling toolbox has now got one-to-many, dependency, and many-to-many tools. For those of you who have used PowerDesigner in the past, you know that if you wanted to draw a many-to-many relationship in either a conceptual or logical, you had to, well actually mostly in the conceptual, you drew a one-to-many and then you went into the property sheet and you modified it to become a many-to-many. Well, now you don't have to do that because there's actually a tool in the toolbox that lets you do that, as well as making a relationship dependent. The Notes tab has now become the Definitions tab. So lots of times when I'm out consulting, one of the common questions I always get is, where does the definition go? Does it go in the comments field, or does it go in this thing called notes description? So it was rather ambiguous as to where you would put the definition. So now it's no longer ambiguous. It goes in the definition description under the definition tab. But they've also done some other things with that notes tab. You can actually now use a timestamp for annotation. So I could go into the model and I could create an annotation on something and then timestamp it so somebody will know that I created that annotation. A lot of times when annotations are used, we don't necessarily know who created it and when did they create it, and is this an old annotation, is this a new annotation, have we already addressed this question? So it's useful for that kind of thing. Name-to-code mirroring is now name-to-code synchronization or synchronized code, and they moved it from a model level function, from an application level function to a model level function. So now you can toggle it on and off for each individual model rather than for the whole application. And name and code visibility can now be toggled on and off, or from name to code and code to name, which is kind of nice. And you can also add a prefix or a suffix to a physical data model during generation. So that's useful as well. So rather than bore you with a lot of slide stuff, I'm going to jump into PowerDesigner and show you some of these 16.6 stuff. First thing here I'll point out in PowerDesigner, let me just maximize things a little bit here. This is a conceptual data model. And if you look over here on the far right-hand side, you'll now see a toolbar with the familiar one-to-many relationship, but now we've got that with a D next to it, which indicates that it's now a dependent, or sometimes people call this an identifying relationship. And you can now draw a many-to-many relationship right on the diagram without having to go and have an extra step to go ahead and make a change or a modification to that. Another thing that I really like about PowerDesigner here is, let me go into my physical data model. And if we look at this, you can see that I am now displaying the name. If I want to display the code, all I have to do now is up on the toolbar at the very top, there's this little thing, it looks like N and C, name and code. And if I click it once, it will go to code. So now you see I have EMP and all of the code level stuff. And if I click it again, it flips back to name, which is very nice depending on who you're talking to. If you've got an audience that's full of business people, you can simply flip this into the name display and people can understand from the business name what you're talking about. And if you're talking to, let's say, data architects or DBAs, you can flip it into code and show things that way. So that's one of the nice features that PowerDesigner has here. Some of the other things that we have here, if I go to, let's say, for instance, my logical model, if I want to make a physical data model out of this logical data model, and let's say, for instance, I always prefix my tables with TBL underscore, I could go to the Tools menu and I could generate a physical data model. And then on the Details tab here, I can actually supply TBL underscore right here with the underscore character. And then when I actually go ahead and generate that model, the model will have in it already all of the underscore characters, all the TBL characters here in front of every single table. So it makes things kind of convenient when you're actually doing generations in PowerDesigner. Now, some of the other things that I'll show you here have to do with other kinds of models that we have in PowerDesigner that a lot of people might not be that familiar with. So I'm going to show you what you can do with those models. But before I do that, let me just close some of these open models here so my computer isn't taking up so much memory. Okay, so let's take a look first at the overall project here. I've got a project called Orders and Shipment Project. And if we drill into this, what you can see here is that I can actually show you every single model in the project and how that model relates to another model. So if I zoom in here on the far left-hand side here, we can see that I have got requirements models about orders and shipments that are a business level. And then those business level requirements actually drive some functional requirements for the particular project. And then from there, we can see how the requirements drive to different business process models, how a business process model can, let's say, populate a conceptual data model with maybe some data, and then the conceptual data model can drive to the logical level, and then the logical level can drive down to the physical. As well, we might also have some UML models in this as well as some XML models and an enterprise architecture model. So this is a high-level overview of all the different model types, and we'll drive into each one of these. First one is looking at my requirements model. So the requirements model is a bit of a misnomer in that, yes, it is called the requirements model, but really it's just a hierarchical listing of stuff that's important to you. So that might not actually be a requirement. It might be something like a vision. So what's the vision? What are goals? What are the key performance indicators? What are our targets? So we can take these things here and we can list them, but we can also link them back to other things. So if I, let's say, drill into a particular requirement here, I have the ability to actually link it to something else. So we have requirement traceability links. Now I can link this to another set of requirements. I can link this to an external file like Excel or Word or PowerPoint or a PDF. I can also link this out to a URL if I wanted to, maybe an intranet or something like that. So we have the ability to link to a lot of different things. So in this case, I might decide that, well, there's a business process model out there that might have a business process called manage inventory, and maybe manage inventory is a process that's linked to this particular requirement. And now I can actually say that this requirement and the inventory process are actually linked together. So you can do a lot with the requirements model. It's kind of an underutilized model, really, but it's very, very powerful, and you can use it for lots of different things. Now, since we talked about business process model, let's go into what kind of business process models we can create with PowerDesigner. One of the first ones here that we'll take a look at is the DFD. Believe it or not, people still use data flow diagrams. And in PowerDesigner, you can create a data flow diagram. This is a level 0 DFD, so it's a topmost level data flow diagram. And then I can actually open this diagram and drive into it. So now we can take a look at the process by which we receive products into inventory, how products are stored in inventory, what happens when we sell those products, what happens when we ship those products. Lots of information needs to flow along these lines when we actually go through this. So if I go into store products, then I can actually click on this data tab, and you can see I've got a CRUD here. There's something about incoming shipments that's important to this particular process. Receiving products, that also might have some data, and there's the same CRUD information there. If I wanted to, I could go to the Tools menu here, and I could look at a data CRUD matrix. Oop, I have to go up a level. Go up a level and look at the data CRUD matrix, and now I can see all the C's, the R's, the U's, and the D's. So along the top here are all of the pieces of data that are of interest, and over here on the left-hand side, these are the actual processes that need that data. So a business process model in PowerDesigner can be a data flow diagram. The other kind of process models in PowerDesigner are the popular BPMN notation style with the swim lanes and the process decomposition here. So we have two kinds of BPMN that's supported in PowerDesigner. One is called BPMN descriptive. Excuse me. And what descriptive does for you is it gives you a high-level set of symbols here. You can see along the right side here where I've got this BPMN 2.0 descriptive. I've got a subset of the complete BPMN here. This is more targeted towards business analysts and business people that don't need to get into so much detail about something. But you can simply drill into a particular artifact. We now have a definitions tab here. As I told you before, it used to be called notes description. And there's an annotation tab here. And along here, you can actually have a timestamp. I could put a timestamp in here, and I might have a question about this check credit process, so I could, ask a question that I might want to log this for later, or have somebody else look at it. So when I check it into the repository, I might say, George, can you go ahead and take a look at this model? Look at the annotation there. I've got a couple of questions. I know you're the subject matter expert. Could you just comment, reply to those? And so that's one of the things that you can have sort of a give and take on this annotation by using the timestamp, which is kind of nice. The other thing is, let me show you the full BPMN here, the executable stuff. Now, the executable stuff is, of course, if you look over here on the far right, where you've got my palette here, you've got a tremendous amount of other kinds of things that you can do with BPMN. So the descriptive stuff is just sort of a subset, but PowerDesigner does support the full BPMN if you're interested. But for those that are familiar with an earlier version of PowerDesigner where we used to have something called the analysis model, it hasn't gone away. It's still a very popular thing. And you can set like a IDEF level 0 sort of scoping diagram where we could see all the different things that are within scope. We can also attach additional notes to something. If I double click on this, I can actually see that I've got a file object that says these are the notes that I took during an interview with the receiving and the stocking people, and these are by, let's say, role, the kind of notes I got. So I can stick these in here. I can also do it with a BPMN model as well. But just like before, I can open up this diagram, and here I can have different levels. So I can go to level 1, which is the as-is, or level 1, which is the to-be. Let's go to the as-is. And then I can have information about this particular model, let's say, and I can have notes assigned to it. I can drill into this. I can add my comments in here. Details about the data can be supplied here, etc. So the standard good old-fashioned analysis model is still available in PowerDesigner, and you can still use it. So those are the different kinds of business process models that you can create in PowerDesigner. Let's take a look at the data models. Our old friend, the conceptual data model, is here, and you can see that. I don't know if you don't remember far enough back, PowerDesigner used to be able to do ER notation for supertypes and subtypes, and now we can actually do Barker notation, which is the box-in-box type notation. So I could see an order can be either a purchase order or a sales order, and a sales order can contain a product, and a product is stored at a facility. And I get products through suppliers, and I sell products to customers through shipments. So these, again, are very high-level conceptualized business kind of artifacts that are really more about, getting definitions for certain things. So this is where I would supply my definitions about this particular thing. And then, of course, we added a logical model to PowerDesigner a while back, and the logical model is similar to the conceptual data model, except with one difference, and that is, actually there's a couple of differences, but you'll notice here we've got something called an FI, which is really a foreign indicator, which is something the logical model can show, but the conceptual data model can't show. So that's a difference there. So you can begin to define your identifiers and keys and things like that in this logical type model, and then you can drive that logical model down to one or more physical models. So at the physical level, we've got, your standard physical data model, and just like before with the name and code thing, I can flip between the name and the code if I'd like. And one of the other things here is that you can generate this, or you can actually change the notation style through the model options. So you've got conceptual, codicil, relational, different types of notation styles that you can select here. One of my most favorite features in PowerDesigner of all time is undo. So you can always undo the last thing that you did in PowerDesigner. Now, one of the other things here that's nice about the data model is that if I go to my conceptual data model level, on the far left-hand side here, I've got some data items. And what I can do is if I'm interested in sort of seeing the impact or lineage of a particular item, such as, let's say, order date, I could do a right-click and do an impact and lineage analysis that will tell me that this data item actually was generated out as a logical object and then has an inheritance structure which ties back to a physical column called purchase order in a physical data model. So the nice thing about all of these different models and all of these different levels is that I do have the ability to run traceability through all those different levels. Not only that, I can also save these out as what are called impact and lineage analysis diagrams. So let's suppose I really wanted to see a full impact of a lot of things here. I can actually start at the requirement level here. Let me zoom in. And say I want to see, based on a particular requirement here that says that we have to have automatic notifications to accounts payable, how does that actually branch out? And here we'll be able to see all the data, all the business process, and we can also see UML as well. So if, let's say, for instance, there was a use case that was associated with this, I could see the use case properties with whatever specifications there might be that are tied to that particular use case, and all the details about that, and I can just navigate to it straight from this impact and lineage analysis diagram. So I guess on that note, let me show you the UML stuff here. In PowerDesigner, they support, I believe, is it up to, I think it's UML 2.2, I think. Not exactly sure, but we have support for class diagrams. There's also support for use case. So again, like I said, you can drill into the use case and see the specifications. If there are implementation classes, you can have that. You can see the definitions. If this diagram is related to another diagram, you can show those as well. You can also have sequence diagrams and the communications diagram, use case scenarios. Sometimes people build these out in BPMN, but we still have the activity diagram here in PowerDesigner, so you can build those out as well. I think in this one, let's see, diagram properties, this one might actually have a set of related. This one does. So this activity diagram is actually related back to a use case diagram. So you can relate diagram types to one another so that I can say that the, let's say, narrative of the use case is actually visualized through the activity diagram, and this would be that activity diagram. State charts are always popular. So if we want to understand we have a product, what is the state of a product? It's either on order, it's inventoried, it can be sold, it can be packaged, and it can be shipped, or it can be returned and re-inventoried. So here I can actually sort of lay out how I want to understand how products work, and here I can see the particular functions or business operations that happen: matching, verifying, offloading, looking up, placing, updating, and notifying are all part of this particular state chart. Now, this is more of a lower level kind of view of things, but if I want to get a bigger level, higher level scope, then I can go into what's called the enterprise model or the enterprise architecture model. Now, the enterprise architecture model is unique in that it actually has specific diagram types. So in the enterprise model, you've got this concept of organizational chart. So I could see, you know, what are the roles of the people that work in the warehouse? We've got receiving, shipping, stocking, order fulfillment, particular roles played. We've got an order fulfillment clerk. We can have the definition that describes exactly what that role is and what's done there. An entire department, so we can have details about what this department does. Does this department have sub-departments to it? So all the things I need to really look at in order to understand who is involved. I can also use things like stereotypes to define the external organizations from the internal organizations. Since shippers and suppliers don't actually work for us, we work with them, I can actually call them out as being external to us. We can also look at something like how do we communicate with our external organization. So we know that the shippers will actually ship the product to the customer, and the suppliers actually supply us with products that we can actually ship. So we can see that. We can also see the documents or instruments of the business. So we know that there are purchase orders and invoices that are actually flowing between these different communication avenues. And I can go in here and define exactly what a purchase order is. And I can show you exactly what items are going to be on a purchase order. So there's a purchase order object, and a purchase order generally has a purchase order item on it. So from a business perspective, I can understand how the purchase order sort of flows through this organization. Then there's the process architecture view. So here we can see in the middle, we've got some core processes that we have to do. So we receive customer orders, we fulfill those orders, we ship the product to the customer, and then we get payment from the customer. These are the 4 core processes that make this company work. And if any one of these processes doesn't work efficiently, then we'll probably have some problems with the company. If any one of these processes completely fails, we will probably be in big trouble. So they are the core processes that make the business run. Sometimes people just call these the money-making processes. Above that is, of course, our governing process. We need to develop new business. We need to monitor the business that we're doing. We have to make sure that we're compliant with things so that we don't run afoul of the law. And then controlling our financial assets for our GAAP accounting and things like that. Below that are the supporting processes. Now, we don't actually, these aren't in the money-making category, but if we are going to sell products to customers, we need to acquire the goods and services. So what is the process that we use to get that? So we have to request. The request has to be approved. Then a purchase order has to be created. Then we get the goods. Then we pay the supplier. So these are really high-level architectural concepts about business processes that have to be executed and executed well in order for us to do what we need to do. Now that generally comes back to something called business capabilities. So in business capabilities, from this perspective, we're looking at things like business functions. So manage products, manage purchase orders, manage supplier invoices. These are all part of our internal operations. Acquire goods. We need to manage who our suppliers are. We have to manage their agreements between our suppliers, and we have to manage the items that we're getting from the suppliers. So these are all capabilities that we have to be able to do in order to be in business. So these things are related back to our IT assets. So we have to have an inventory control database in order for us to manage our inventory. We also might have some business services like update an inventory, locate a product in inventory, an inventory web application that lets us go and execute these business services, notify application service. So we have different services that we might want to create that help us with the idea that we have to be able to have these functions work for us or have our capabilities here. So we know that we have to have some IT assets, so let's drive into looking at those and how those might work. So here we're now looking at different roles. We have a receiving clerk, we have a stocking clerk, we have an order fulfillment clerk. They may use the fulfill order business service that calls an application service that in turn calls maybe a CRM system or something else. Same thing here, I might drill down into an inventory control database that actually has the information about the inventory. If I have questions about this, I can double click on it and I can see details about what type of database is it. Is it a data mart? Is it a data warehouse? Is it transactional? I can put comments in here. Role associations would be who would be responsible or who would care about this. Since I have roles defined, I can actually pick by role or organizational unit. I would say that warehouse operators probably care the most about the inventory control database, so I might associate that with them. I can also see that this is tied to actual physical data model. So if I want, I can now open up the physical data model and say, oh, okay, this is the physical data model that represents what the inventory control database is. So you can see that from a high level, I just popped down to the actual code level for this particular thing. So I can look for indexes, and I can look at keys, and I can look at definitions, and I can look at all kinds of stuff, even preview of what this table is supposed to be when I generate the DDL. So the beauty of this is that I can drive from a high level right down to a low level and show all the different pieces and parts and how they actually interact right down to XML. I could see that I might have an XML model that might be part of this. We know that we receive shipments from suppliers, and maybe we communicate with the suppliers through some, maybe it's an EDI process or maybe it's something else, but we can define what does the XML model look like. And if we wanted to, we could actually preview what the actual DDL, the XML looks like for certain things right here within this particular XML model type. So here we've pretty much looked at all the different models that PowerDesigner can produce and essentially what you can do with them and how they relate. So now let's talk about management of all these models. So it's like, hey, Jeff, that's awesome. I can do all this, but I work in a team. I don't work by myself. What should I be doing here? So this is where we'll look at the repository here in PowerDesigner. In PowerDesigner, you can take those projects and you can actually check them in as a project into the repository. They also can be versions. You'll notice that at the end of this, I've got V1. You can actually have a different version of a model, but you can actually have a different version of a model artifact as well. So one of the nice things about how PowerDesigner works is that you have the ability to go in and not only create a version on an entire model, but you can actually version individual artifacts, which is nice because now you have a historical record of what has changed in that object or that model over time. So you can always compare it to, let's say, an older version. And another thing is that you can also do, and people don't realize this, is that if I were to take, let's say, for instance, and do my requirements model, once I get the requirements accepted by the team, I can now check that in and make that V1. Anything that happens to this requirement over time, you now have a record, so you can say, well, the reason why the project took more time and more money is because this is the set of requirements that you agreed to, and this is the requirements that we added over time as the scope of the project increased. So you can always compare V1 with V2, which is always kind of nice. So you can do versioning in PowerDesigner, but I will caution you, it is not a version control product. You still need something like Git or Perforce to do that, but this will actually keep a running version of the artifact over time. Now, because we can store stuff in the repository, that means other people can check it in and check it out, and we can have a collaborative environment that allows us to make changes. You can also have something called a library. Now in PowerDesigner, there are lots of different resources that you can work with. There are things like conversion tables, which will take a name and convert it to an abbreviation. There are certain extensions that you can use within PowerDesigner. There are different model languages, model templates, which are kind of popular here, that you can use and store here within the library so that people will have access to them, as well as any shared objects. So let's suppose, for instance, you created a model and you have modeled customer pretty well and you don't want to reinvent that. You could actually store it in a shared objects and allow other people to take that object and use it in their models. Since it's already gone through, let's say, a governance process, we know that it's a vetted object and we can freely use other models without, causing any problems. Now, talking about vetted objects, let's take a look at the change lists. One of the nice things about PowerDesigner is that there is a kind of governance control here within PowerDesigner, and it's achieved through this thing called a change list. Now, a change list is kind of like what I'll call PowerDesigner repository limbo. You check it in to a change list, and it remains locked until it's reviewed. And then when it's reviewed, then it's either accepted or returned or rejected before it goes into the repository. So what this lets you do is, let's say, for instance, maybe you've got a contractor who's doing some modeling for you, and you don't want them to check it directly into the repository. You'd like to review it before it goes in there, so then you can actually check it into a change list. And part of the change list allows you to actually send out an automated email notification to people that might be on the approvers list. So let me show you kind of how that works. If I go to my local tab here and open up this particular model here, let me close this one for now. And I take this sample logical model and I do a check-in. Now, I could check it in just like I normally would because I happen to be, if you'll notice, admin on this. But because an admin also has all the rights of everything else, I can actually function like a person who has a submit role. So I'm going to submit this into a change list. Now, I can actually add any comments I want during this check-in to the change list process. So you can add a comment, and I can say OK. And what happens is, if I go to this repository here, you can see that I have something that looks like a pencil is what it looks like. And what this means is that this model exists here, and I can continue to iterate. That is, I can still make changes and check them back in and check them out and make changes. So the iteration cycle still happens even though I'm in the change list. But at one point, you will go and you'll say, OK, I want to submit this. Now, when you choose to submit it, it basically says, OK, this model is now going to become locked until it goes through this full approval process. Now, locked means you can't check anything into it. You can certainly check it out. Other people can still check it out. It's just that changes cannot be checked into it. So when I click Submit, I've got my details here, my initial check-in. I can add more comments, whatever it is I want to add during that, and then actually choose Submit. Now, when I choose Submit, it's now going to be routed to those who are part of the, let's say, governance body that's going to evaluate this. So if I'm a person here who's on that team, and I go to Get Mail, and I click on it, it says here, OK, because I was admin, we probably would say submitter, has submitted change list number 1021 for your review. All of the comments that have been made are in here. It gives you details about what you can do with it, et cetera, et cetera. So this lets somebody know that they need to go and take a look at this model. So let's suppose that's me. I go ahead and I take a look at it. Notice that it's changed from being a pencil to being a gear. Now, if I go to this gear, I can return it back to the modeler with notes for revision. Like, for instance, I could say, looks pretty good, but it looks like you use plural nouns. I'd like you to go back and change all of your plural nouns to singular nouns and resubmit. I could do something like that. I could say, oh, this looks awesome. I love it. It's great. Go ahead. Let's just approve it. Or I could outright say, you know what? We've decided to go down a different path, and we're no longer going to do this, so I'm just going to reject this outright. So that's one of the things that you can do with the change list with the repository. That was added in version 16, which is quite nice. So that's the repository side of things. Now, the repository is actually accessed through what's known as the PowerDesigner Web. So I'm going to show you a little bit about PowerDesigner Web here. And let's see if this is still live. Oh, no, it's not. I have to log in.
And Jeff, just as you're logging in there, just a note, we do have a couple of questions that we'll probably want to cover at the end in the last 10 or 15 minutes, so just an FYI.
Yep, I'll be wrapping this up in 5 minutes, quarter to the hour, and we'll just handle whatever questions we've got there. Here in PowerDesigner, I can view my data models in here, business process models, all of these other models that I may have created here in PowerDesigner. If I want to drill into a certain set here, I can drill into this set. And then I can drill into something, let's say like purchase order, and I can click on it. And I can click on it. There it goes. It's a little slow. There's a little lag here. I can add a comment to this. I can say, you know, my comment. So anything I'd like to say about this particular thing, I can add that comment here, and I get a nifty little bullet or comment bubble that shows up here. I can show details about this particular thing. What other things is it related to? Things like that. Did it get generated out? So this got generated out as something else. Impacts, which would be entity 1 to entity 2 contained, so I can see that relationship. One of the new things that did get added in here is something called impact and lineage analysis. But you can actually share the link, print the diagram, export the image as, I think it's JPEG or something like that. You can generate a report on this. If I click on the impact and lineage analysis, and it has to retrieve these objects. One of the things that PowerDesigner does under the surface is it starts to index things, so sometimes it takes a little more time here. But if I look at this, I can see purchase order is related to something called a product, a purchase order, an order. So the order is, of course, the super type to the purchase order, if you remember. So this would be upstream of me. If I want to go this way, that's lineage. And if I want to go downstream, that's the other way, that would be impact. So I could say, okay, purchase order, and let's see what the impacts are downstream. So PowerDesigner will go ahead and evaluate this and say, okay, purchase order has got something called a purchase order item, and it was generated as a table called purchase order. And then if I want to take a look at that, I can continue to expand this and show more details about how this thing runs an impact and lineage analysis on a particular artifact that you're interested in. Also, while I'm here, I will also show you that there are different kinds of reports, and one of the reports that you can do in PowerDesigner is called a web report. So there's a web report here that'll let you look at model level diagrams. I can, let's say, click on an object in a diagram. I can drill into it. So this is an entity called employee, which will tell me what the definition of it is. All the different artifacts like attributes that are related to it. I can click on a reference. It'll take me to the reference. If I want to see, let's say, every single, these are relationships, I want to see the entity product, I can drill into different pieces and parts of that. Also, one of the things in the glossary of PowerDesigner, which I will show you this, will actually let you create a full glossary, which would be the business name or business term and its related abbreviation. So I could go into something like employee, and I could see the definition of what an employee is and things like that. If I come back into PowerDesigner quickly, you can see here on the left-hand side, this tab down here at the bottom indicates that I have a glossary. And this is my, we'll call it sort of a quasi-taxonomy. People and organizations, I can drill into an organization. I can see that there are synonyms. I can drill into this, and it can tell me exactly what the definition of an organization is, including its abbreviations. It has a status of approved, which means it's good and we can use it. There are synonyms that we can actually use here, or we're actually relating back to something. There's also a related term. So a party. A party is related to an organization, but it isn't actually an organization, since a party can actually be one person. You can be a party of one. It's harder to get seated at a restaurant that way, but you can be a party of one. Does anybody get that joke? Anyways, here, this is essentially this is what lets the business people take a look at the actual details of what the terms are in my particular glossary. And so that is going to take us up to the quarter of the hour. So at this point, I'm just going to stop the PowerDesigner demonstration and take whatever questions we might have.
Jeff, we've got several questions. I just want to make sure that I highlight a couple of points. One, the data lineage, the portal, and the read access capabilities are all free, and there's no cost to them in the PowerDesigner editions, right? So I wanted to make sure that everyone understands that. The way that PowerDesigner works is that it charges per developer edition. So whether you're an enterprise architect or a data architect license, that's what they charge for, and the rest are free. So
actually, Robert, that brings up a good thing that I did not cover, and I should just cover this briefly in PowerDesigner. The difference between data architect and enterprise architect, real quickly. In data architect, the kind of models that you get to work with are the physical data model, the logical data model, the conceptual data model, something called a data movement model, and an XML model, and the requirements model. Those are all included in data architect. Enterprise architect adds to it all the UML modeling that I showed you, obviously the enterprise architecture model, and all of the business process modeling that I showed you. So that's the major difference between those different editions. I know we called that out at the beginning of this, and I forgot to mention it, so I can at least say now I've hit that requirement.
And
continue, Robert.
We have that list actually on our website of what is in each additional feature. So as I say, we've got about 10 minutes or so, 10 or 12 minutes, just go through some questions here that people were asking. Let's see, Mel asked several questions. The first one, not sure you'll be able to answer this, but you'll be able to at least indicate how we'll be able to get an answer. The question is, when will Solution Manager 7.2 integration be supported? Do you know the answer to
that? One, I don't know. I do not know, because that one would be a product manager kind of a question. Since we more or less just are resellers and implementers of PowerDesigner, we don't actually influence the direction of what features will be added and when or if they get added at all. So unfortunately, I cannot answer that question.
Well, not a problem. What we'll do, Jeff, and for Mel, we'll actually go back to product management. We've got a good relationship with SAP's product management as well, and we will ask that question, see if we can get an answer back for that, Mel.
Fair enough.
Next question came from George. Are the naming templates persistent for the next time? That was a question George asked on the naming templates when you were doing that at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about naming templates for a minute here. In PowerDesigner, you can see here that obviously I can take and switch between these abbreviated technical names and these business names. Well, in PowerDesigner, there's actually something called model options, and under model options is something called a naming convention, and there is a name to code conversion. So what is the conversion? It's simply a column with the name in it and a column with the code in it. So if it sees the name, it will supply the appropriate code. So that's what they're talking about by the templates. Now the template is of course part of the model, so that when you save the model, you have the template associated with it. Now if I start a new model, I would have to manually say, okay, which template am I going to use? Well, one of the things that you can do in PowerDesigner is you can actually create what's called a template. Now, if I create a template, like this one, customer accounts, and I choose OK, what will happen is I'll end up with basically a new model. And in that new model, if I look at my model options, it should already have, I think I've got this one. Yeah, there's already a conversion table applied to it. There's also things like standard data items, standard domains, standard business rules, standard entities. So anything you want to include in a template, you can include in a template, and then I can simply use these things to start building out a model. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to create something about an account. Then I could drill into an account and I could say, well, what's my list of data items? Well, we have account number, I need that, and a balance, I need that as well. So I'll put those two things in there so that I can start to flesh these things out.
Yeah, George just sent a quick note saying that he was asking about the template tab, etc., and the new generation features. That's what he was asking about.
Oh. The template tab in new generations. Hang on a sec. I may have missed that. Generate. I'll have to get back to you on that one, George. The only one that I'm aware of is this naming template, which we covered, which would allow you to put something like TBL underscore in front of it so that you can have a prefix for a particular object that you're driving through onto the PDM level. You can also have these things change for PKs and AKs and FKs, as well as this one here, which has been around for a while, which is what happens when we have a collision on the foreign key names. How does PowerDesigner resolve that?
So we'll do a one-on-one with George because we'll get back to George on that. I got a couple of questions from Mel. First one is there a way to have the hierarchical of business process diagrams? Is there a way to have a hierarchy of business process diagrams? That was a question mark. Where at a high level, one can drill into an item in the process diagram and go through in a more detailed view of the business process. That was what Mel was asking.
You can. I mean, it does support business process decomposition. So if you look over here on the left-hand side, I've got this diagram here called analysis scope, which is the high level. If I look at my processes here, I've got manage inventory, and you can see here I've got two diagrams at this level, a to be and an as is, and then I could actually have yet more sub-diagrams as well. So each time I go through and I tell it, okay, I want you to open the next level diagram, you can pick what you want for the next level diagram. And if I had decomped this, then I can drill down into that. And so you can see the different levels and you can drill down into those levels. BPMN does it a slightly different way in that you have two options here. You can actually see in what's known as a composite view. I'll drill in here so it's easier to visualize. This particular order fulfillment sub-process, or I can have it show as just a regular decomposition type process and then drill down that way. It works exactly the same way as it does in the other one, in that all the magic sort of happens at the process level. So in in BPMN, they don't use the word process, they use the word task. And so if you have subtasks, those would actually show up below these tasks, and then they would have other sub-processes. Or you can have actual sub-process. In this case, this is the business process. Yeah, that would be the drill down. So if I chose not to show it as a composite, and I actually wanted to drill in, it'd have a little plus sign on it. So that's how you would do it in PowerDesigner. You'd use the sub-process or subtask in the process modeling to do the drill downs.
Great. Mel had another question right after that, and he says, can the items in the organization be referenced in the swim lane business process diagram?
Let me see if I understand. Can you reference those?
Can items
like
in the
here I've got warehouse, finance, and sales. This itself is a swim lane, and if I double click on it, it will tell me about the sales, and then I can have definitions and rules and stuff like that. I can also establish a traceability link back to, let's say, for instance, I wanted to look at my enterprise architecture model, and in my enterprise architecture model, I wanted to look at my, let's say, I don't have those there. Where's my EAM? What level is it at? Hang on one sec. Glossary, business order. Oh, I think I might have been in the wrong one. Anyways, just to let you know what you can do, as I can tie it back to anything I'd like. Oh, that's why I don't have all the subs selected. I've been working with PowerDesigner forever, and I still sometimes mess up. Anyways, whatever I select, I can now trace to this particular artifact. So if this particular swim lane, I wanted it to relate back to relate back to my enterprise architecture view, oh, that's why it's not open. then I could actually relate it back to this thing here like receiving. So receiving could be traceable to my BPMN, or my BPMN could be traceable to my EAM. So all the models can be interrelated through traceability links. That's one of the things that gets you your impact and lineage analysis. So I think I've answered the question.
Well, we got in a question that I must admit, when you mentioned this during the webcast, I was a little bit confused myself. Jane had asked that there was a little bit more about the statement on the repository isn't a version control tool, and you'd mentioned another product. But as far as I'm aware, though, PowerDesigner has got all the capabilities to manage its internal objects and models and version control. So I wasn't sure what you were trying to get at. I don't think Jane was either on that aspect.
What I was trying to get at here is, let's suppose that you had a data model, a physical data model, and you were working on that physical data model, and somebody else was also working on another physical data model, and you wanted to have a release that was some parts of physical data model 1 and some parts of physical data model 2 that were kind of integrated together, and then that became a new version. The versioning in PowerDesigner only lets you go back historically. Like, for instance, if I said in a particular 2 models, let's say I had version 3 and version 1. If I roll back to version 1, I'd lose version 3 and version 2. In version control products, you actually can keep all of the different versions and sort of take pieces from version 1 and pieces from version 2 and create a version 4. PowerDesigner doesn't actually work like that. That's what version control products do. So that's why I mention that. And the only reason I mention that is because it's one of those questions that I get asked a lot is, does this work like, SourceSafe or Perforce or something like that, where we version code and to have different versions of code? This isn't really a code versioning kind of a thing.
All right, Jeff, in the last couple of minutes, maybe we can just do yes, no kind of questions, because there's 4 or 5 questions still left. Another one from Mel was, from the glossary, can the corresponding table be displayed as a link?
Yes, you can. Just like the other things, anything in PowerDesigner can have a traceability link to anything else. So that could be a physical data model or a logical data model, anything I want to relate it to. So yes, the answer is any model, any artifact can be related to the glossary through traceability links.
Great. Bernard had a question. Manage versions versus graduation, test, pre-prod period in the repository can only be done with the use of branch. Is that correct? There was a question mark there.
Branch is one way to do it. The other way to do it is to just use regular generations. So what a branch kind of does is it sort of formalizes a development phase, test, production, those kinds of things. That's what you can do with branches, but I could create many models and I can actually generate into another model from another model and name that model a different version. So branching is one way to do it. The other way to do it is just regular model generations.
Great. Mel had, I think, 2 more questions, but the one that she's asked is, that was asked is it named licensing or floating licensing? And I'll take that one. SAP PowerDesigner only offers floating licenses. We can obviously help you upgrade to the latest version of concurrent floating licenses. Laura, who says, hi Jeff, can users update the model from the web portal?
They can. This one will require a license. So when Robert was telling you that it's basically, no license is required for the portal, one of the things that you can do with the portal is, in some instances, not all instances, is you can actually, where did I go here? Oh, to go back. You can actually do some modeling in the portal itself. Right now, it's just business process modeling that's supported and a couple of other things. But if you want to update some artifacts. I don't know exactly which artifacts you can update. I know that, and this is where I'm a little behind the times, is that there is a way that the portal points to the license server to see if you have a license key. And if you do, then it unlocks the ability to make some edits to objects. So the answer to the question is yes, you can. And the second answer part of the question is it will require a license.
And Laura, you can come to Sandhill Consultants. We can help you and guide you through that. Just a few more questions. I do realize that it's now 3:01. I don't want to cut it off just here. I want to try and get through these final questions and then go to our end couple of slides so we've got everything completed. So for those of you that have to leave, we thank you for your attendance. We will be putting this recording up onto our YouTube link on Sandhill Consultants. 3 or 4 more questions, Jeff. We can again keep these as short as possible. Bernard asked a question: integration with Visual Studio, plugin or entity framework? Do you know the answer to that question?
I don't know the answer to that. The only thing I can tell you is that at one time there was, or may still be, a plugin to Visual Studio, but that was back in the version 15 time frame that I remember it. I haven't used it since then, and I'm not sure how much work has been done on it. So I do know that there is a plugin for Visual Studio, as well as what's the IBM product there? There's another one that plugs into an IBM framework, but I cannot tell you what the status is of it and what functionality it actually has.
All right, ellipse was what Mel said. Is it, so one last question, I guess, from Tricia. Is it easy to have more than one repository for an organization so different branches can use it on their own and people will be able to switch easily between repositories?
Yes, it's very easy. The only thing that I would caution you about is that, it just came to mind. Eclipse was the name of the IBM product that was
yes.
a plugin. So to the answer to this particular question, you can set up as many repositories as you'd like. Where you really have to be cautious is to decide which repository is the system of record, and make sure that when people want to get the latest model, that they are looking at the repository that is deemed the system of record. Here's an example of how I've seen some customers work with the repository. You might have a company who's headquartered in the United States, but actually has an organization in the UK and an organization in India. The UK and India will probably manage their own separate repositories, but somebody who's the repository administrator will be responsible for checking out the latest models and then checking them into the repository in the United States. It does require more management and more documentation, but it's not a difficult process technically. It's just that you need to stay on top of who's doing what, when, to what repository, and all that stuff, because if they get out of sync, then it becomes hard.
Great. And Jeff, if you can bring up the slides, we'll just go into the last two slides.
Yep. Tab into the slides.
So and this is a build slide, you can just go ahead and click on the last two. So how can Sandhill Consultants help when it comes to PowerDesigner? We can provide sales, support, training on the products, processes, and people. We provide our best standards and best practices framework, and obviously enhance the value of modeling. And go to the next slide, Jeff. So call to action. If you're interested in upgrading to the latest version of PowerDesigner and you're off maintenance, contact us. If you're interested in PowerDesigner education, contact us. If you're interested in PowerDesigner data warehouse services, contact us. Enterprise modeling set of standards for PowerDesigner, you got it, contact us. And contact Robert Lutton, there's my email. We'd like to thank everyone for attending. We are planning another webcast for next month, May the 26th at 2 p.m., titled Modern Data Modeling with SAP PowerDesigner 16.6. So with that, I'd like to extend my thanks to Jeff and our people who asked the questions, and we look forward to seeing you on our next call. Thanks. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.